now by Chris Burnett, retired Marine Corps lawyer with 22 years of service, 5 combat deployments, now a Republican candidate for Maryland's 6th congressional district in the U.S. House of Representatives. Not only do I want to thank you for coming on, I want to thank you for your service and thank you for taking the time. Your reaction, 2-week ceasefire, it feels like a win for the president. I don't know if it was another president who made these threats, if it would have been taken seriously and we'd be in this position. So your reaction, and is this a win right now for the president?
Well, Jesse, first, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to talk about this with you tonight, so I really appreciate the opportunity. I do think this was a win for the United States and President Trump. Some of the rhetoric was certainly inflammatory, and it's going to call into question what some people think is appropriate. But I do think the aggressive nature of this and the way the tactical execution has been pursued, that this is absolutely a win for the United States. Because what you see right now is we've set the conditions to have essentially decimated their capability to conduct any type of response to the U.S. or anyone else. Yes, they continue to hold the Strait of Hormuz at risk, but it's in a very limited capacity because we've essentially sunk their entire Navy. By taking the next 2 weeks of a ceasefire, we've allowed ourselves to replenish our stocks, and we've also now extended an olive branch to the Iranian people to say, we're going to allow you to reset, and we're going to look forward to a long-term solution here. So this was 100% a success on the part of the president and a part of the U.S. forces involved.
Do you believe the ceasefire will stand? I mean, will the Iranians keep the Strait of Hormuz open?
Well, I'm hopeful. I think anybody that has spent any time in the Middle East knows that there's always going to be the question as to whether or not you can trust a ceasefire with the Iranians. While I've been there, 5 different deployments to the region, our greatest concern was always being held at risk by the Iranians, the IRGC, or Iranian proxies. In this case, I think we have sufficiently degraded their ability that they may not be able to break the ceasefire, quite frankly, other than some asymmetric or decentralized responses that would not be coordinated or intentional. So my hope is that it will hold, but I know, I'm a realist, I don't know that it will be able to withstand 2 weeks of Iranian compliance.
I want to go to the law. I want to talk about the rhetoric, right? You explained it as inflammatory. Is it appropriate for the president to say, quote, a whole civilization will die tonight if a deal isn't reached? Because it could be argued that is what led to today's 2-week ceasefire. You're dealing with a different negotiating partner, right, who may not be as reasonable as somebody else. But here's the counter-argument. The president was essentially threatening to attack civilian infrastructure, which could potentially violate the Geneva Convention, violate international law, though it gets kind of murky if you have sites that are both for civilian and military use. What's your take on it?
Well, I think, first of all, his approach is unique. We saw this in North Korea. We saw this escalation of rhetoric, and we saw it, quite frankly, work. We have had to deal with saber rattling in the region for as long as anyone can remember. And what I feel like he did here was he matched their rhetoric with his own brand of escalatory rhetoric. Now, I think the argument could be made that this is not appropriate for a U.S. president, that this is not presenting the United States from a position of authority or strength. But the reality is, whether it worked or it did not work, it certainly brought about an outcome that was aligned to the tactical successes that we've been achieving there. I'm hopeful that we're able to continue to build on the success that we've had, and that with this outcome, rhetoric or otherwise, we're able to achieve a long-standing peace, allow the rest of the region to move forward, and quite frankly, get Iran's boot off the neck of the global economy.
Now, the counter-argument is it doesn't work, right? The counter-argument is this blows up, and you do wonder whether or not the president would fulfill his promise to go after civilian infrastructure. I hope that doesn't happen. If that does happen, the question will immediately come back to what I just mentioned. Is that a war crime? Is that just a moment of war? I mean, you tell me whether or not that could be potentially illegal.
Well, I think you framed it correctly. It gets murky very quickly. When you have civilian infrastructure that's used in furtherance of a war-making capability, it's a legitimate military target. So you have to have an issue of distinction, you have to have a distinction of proportionality, and then you also have to take steps to minimize human suffering. So the question ultimately becomes, is the military advantage gained from destroying a piece of infrastructure that was directly supporting their war power capability, was that an adequate justification for an attack? Now, the question really becomes, if you attack infrastructure that is providing energy to a hospital or providing it to civilian services, and the only benefit was to cause suffering to that civilian population, well, that is certainly grounds for a war crime. If you're looking at a desalination plant, now that desalination plant services a civilian population as well as their war-making capability. So you would have to look at that from a factual assessment as to what is the military advantage gained by striking this. And if it's just to terrorize a civilian population, if it's just to undermine their ability to control a civilian population, we are certainly approaching what would be a war crime.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent explanation of the law as I understand it. Speaking of which, got to get your take on this. Is Congress going to be needed to approve a peace deal, a 10-point peace deal, if that's what it is? You heard, I believe it was Lindsey Graham. I mean, there was a whole conversation about whether Congress should have been consulted before taking this action against Iran. Do they need to approve any deal legally?
No, they do not need to approve the deal, but they certainly have the power of the purse. So I think what Lindsey Graham is offering is a way of including Congress in a process where they're not legally required to be involved in, but they could certainly disrupt. And so what we're approaching is the end of the War Powers Resolution window. And that is the 60-day window at which the commander-in-chief, in this case, President Trump, operating under his Article 2, Section 2 authority, can unilaterally act in defense of the United States. At the 60-day mark, he has to ask for additional funding, or he has to begin the withdrawal of forces and end hostilities. And as we approach that 60-day mark, if he doesn't involve Congress in this process, they could pull the plug on funding. Now, this quickly becomes a politicized national security crisis. I do not like Congress meddling in national security because they're going to play politics to their advantage at the expense of service members downrange. So the short answer to your question is no, they do not need to approve it, but I think he would be wise to engage Congress through some kind of a review process so that we don't find ourselves in a funding fight with forces downrange.
Here's my question. How's this the first time you're on my show? My gosh, I can't wait to have you back. Chris, really, thank you for taking the time. Really, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You do. All right. This guy was amazing.